Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Lost Codex Legends. My name is Jesse, and it's been a little while. It's been a little bit of a time. For those of you who watched the special premiere episode of Decoded Season 2, I sort of explained what happened in these episodes. For those of you who don't know, little explanation. I went to the Netherlands in September, which is when these episodes stopped. Came back, had a week and a half to recover. Jet lag, awful. And then I flew to California for BlizzCon, and since I returned from BlizzCon, I've been recovering. Apologies for the short delay, the sort of absence these Lost Codex Legends episodes sort of took, but we are back. And today, we are talking about, I figured, well, what could be the first episode we can return to? And I figured, you know what, we haven't really talked much about rogue characters, so we're going to talk a bit about another rogue character with Edwin Vancleef, our favorite boss in Classic. Yeah, I'm gonna say that. Yeah, he's up there. I don't know. I'm improvising with this favorite boss stuff. Yeah, you know what? We're locking in. I think so. I think it's a good classic boss to appreciate. But we're gonna get started here with Edwin Vancleef's story. And some of what we know about his story and his youth comes from the RPG, which is not canon until Blizzard decides it is canon. Until it's not. But some of it comes from World of Warcraft in general. So little bits here and there are going to be RPG stuff and WoW lore stuff. There's nothing in there that's too out of the realm of possibility, so we're just going to talk about it as if it's all one big sense-making book. Alright, here we go. Edwin Vancleef was once a roofwalker in Stormwind, with a specialty in defeating mechanical defenses. Now, I did find that a little bit odd. That is from the RPG. Mechanical defenses. It sounds more like a combat gameplay thing for the game, but that actually comes up into play later on. But learned further skills throughout the year. His education growing up was dual-natured. His father was a stonemason and taught him skills in that, according to the RPG. But on the other hand, his childhood friend, Matthias Shaw, taught him the roguish skills of combat and how to stealth and all that sorts of stuff. And so Dad taught him to become how to stonemason and how to build stuff, and Shaw taught him how to be sneaky. And eventually, Edwin became the elected guildmaster of the Stonemasons Guild in Stormwind. Vancleef was one of the architects who helped rebuild Stormwind after the Orcish horde fell during the Second War, Stormwind falling during the First War, of course. And shortly after the rebuilding of Stormwind, he was commissioned to build the castle of Netherguard Keep, which was built to stand guard and watch over the Dark Portal. The rebuilding of Stormwind was done in record time, and we've all seen the city. It's an amazing city. Edwin Vancleef did some pretty damn good work. Unfortunately, the House of Nobles proved to be difficult. You see, the Stonemasons were asking for pretty extravagant funds, while the House of Nobles not only refused to pay those extravagant funds, but really only offered kind of crappy compensation in return. Little did the House of Nobles and the Stonemasons know that they were both being played by Lady Katrana Prestor. Katrana Prestor convinced the Stonemasons to ask for these extravagant sums and to not take no for an answer, to take no compromise, to hold their ground, tell the House of Nobles, this is what we want, this is what we're going to get no matter what. On the other side of things, Katrana Prestor meddled in the rebuilding of Stormwind that sort of left the nobility unsatisfied with the craftsmanship of Stormwind City. The nobles, in the meantime, were actually pretty far in debt after they tried to stretch Stormwind's military presence throughout Elwyn Forest and its surrounding regions, and even as far into Stranglethorn. And we presume that this was done by the suggestion of Katrana Prestor, and as a result, the House of Nobles was pretty poor at the time. This massive debt crippled the kingdom's economy and stripped Edwin Vancleef and his stonemasons of anything close to their promised rewards. And as you can imagine, Vancleef was pretty upset, rightfully upset. Edwin spoke out demanding restitution for their work, and in response, the Stormwind House of Nobles ordered the Stonemasons Guild disbanded, which royally pissed off Edwin. Vancleef convinced his stonemasons and other craftsmen, presumably affected by the crippled debt of the kingdom and the lack of funds from the House of Nobles, to start a riot in the streets. And as this riot got out of hand and exploded and chaos erupted throughout the city, several people died, including King Varian's young wife, Tiffin Ryn. Of course, Anduin was already born at this point, but the damage was done. King Varian's wife, Anduin's mom, were killed, and Varian vowed to punish those responsible for the riots. During the riots, Edwin Vancleef's most trusted lieutenant and advisor, Basil Thread, was captured and thrown in the Stormwind Stockade, and that's where the Stockade's boss, Basil Thread, comes from. As the riots settled down, Vancleef and the Stonemasons and many other artisans and craftsmen were cast out of the city, including some tinkers, who Vancleef gathered all these people and fled into the wilds of Elwyn Forest. When Stormwind began to track down the craftsmen and the stonemasons in the rural areas of Westfall and Elwyn, Edwin and the tinkers of the group equipped their band with augmented devices and mechanical weapons. This comes into play that I mentioned earlier with Vancleef's ability to disarm mechanical devices. As time went on, Vancleef became more ruthless, and merchants were robbed en route to Stormwind. Farms in the breadbasket in Westfall were razed and infested with harvest golems, these mechanical deviced creatures, and Vancleef slowly depleted Stormwind of its outside monetary resources. The Stonemasons subsequently became bandits, collecting their promised payments from anyone they could find. Thievery quickly became a way of life for these exiles, who drew the attention of other brigands, criminals, and even mercenaries looking for work. And slowly, the Stonemasons, this group of craftsmen turned criminals, became something much bigger, and Edwin Vancleef christened the newly formed Defias Brotherhood. Over the years, the ranks of the Brotherhood grew to include the skilled, the desperate, and the outcast. And at their height, their membership numbered in the hundreds, allowing them to essentially become a small army. Now, after all these years of living on the run and gathering this Defias Brotherhood gang and burning down farms and stealing from villagers and all this sorts of stuff, he needed a place to operate from. He needed a base of operations where his tinkers could build these crazy harvest golems and weapons of mass destruction and all sorts of stuff, and really just needed a place to hide from the Stormwind forces looking for them. Fortunately, he found what he was looking for in an abandoned mine shaft beneath a barn in Moonbrook in Westfall. But the mining shaft was actually not abandoned. In fact, there were pirates there, led by Captain Bramblebeard, who was subsequently killed, him and his whole crew, and Vancleef took the mines from them. From there, he sent his forces into Westfall, Elwyn, Duskwood, all the surrounding provinces around Stormwind, to keep Stormwind's forces, which is already stretched thin enough, occupied while he operated inside the Dead Mines. And inside the Dead Mines, he oversaw the construction of a massive juggernaut naval vessel, which he planned to use to completely obliterate Stormwind from the sea. But before any of this could take place, before Edwin Vancleef's mastermind plans of revenge could come to fruition, the adventurers come in and ruin the day. They learned of the location of the Defias Brotherhood's secret base, fought their way through the mines, killing goblins and sorcerers and scary golems of all kind, boarded his ship, and subsequently dueled and killed Edwin Vancleef and took his head to Brian Stoutmantle in Westfall, who said at that point the Defias Brotherhood was forever ended. Now, although Edwin Vancleef was dead, the Defias Brotherhood did not die with him. Subsequent events would prove that despite him being killed, whatever plans he had set in motion were still underway. We learn that conspirators within the noble families of Stormwind aimed to get rid of the king with the Defias' help, and later on we learned from Jaina that the Defias Brotherhood was actually active in Dustwallow Marsh and had played a role in the kidnapping of King Varian Rin, which I actually mentioned in the Valera Sanguinar video a little bit. Much later on we learned that Edwin Vancleef had a daughter who had witnessed her father's terrible murder and subsequent decapitation, and goes on with a big, huge storyline, which I won't cover here. I'll cover in her own episode, if she ever gets her own episode. And that's it for Edwin Vancleef, a once skilled and famous stonemason, responsible for returning Stormwind to its former glory, to the current glory that we know it to be today, turned nefarious thief, bandit, and terrorist for the Kingdom of Stormwind, all because of the twisted evil plottings of Katrana Press stories. He's one of those characters where, despite being a villain, there's a part of a story that you empathize with. Now, no one can dispute that Edwin Vancleef is not a murderer or not a bad person, especially with all the farms that were burnt down and the people killed in the riots, including Tiffin, the merchants who were captured and killed en route to Stormwind. He definitely did a lot of bad things. He ran a cartel of thugs. But the reasons that led to the Defias Brotherhood becoming what it was, you feel for him. You feel bad for him because of what Katrina Prestor did and all of her meddling and everything. And, you know, he's friends or was friends with Matthias Shaw, so you can imagine in some alternate universe, maybe Edwin Vancleef, you know, Guildmaster of the Stonemasons Guild of Stormwind, had, you know, really close connections with the spy network of Stormwind, and he could have been a great hero or a great ally to Stormwind, and instead, because of the meddlings of Black Dragons, became one of Stormwind's most infamous villains. And that's it for Edwin Vancleef, the final boss of the Deadmines in classic World of Warcraft. Stay tuned for the next episode of Lost Codex Legends, where we cover... I don't know. Who are we covering next? I don't know. We're going to wing it. I mean, I do know, but am I going to tell you? No. No, that's not how these things work. I could, but that would involve future planning, so we're not going to. All right, we'll see you next time. Goodbye.